Hey everyone, Mike here from MLive.com, joined by Justin Rogers. Last practice in the books already for the first preseason game, Justin. We've seen quite a bit of development one way or the other from the team. A lot of guys have caught our eyes in terms of improvement. I know Joe Lombardi is very high on Michael Williams. He had mentioned today Joe Lombardi thinks that Michael Williams is maybe the most improved player since last year. Got some more run today with the first team at right tackle. But who's caught your eye as maybe a most improved player on the team this year?
Well, Williams is a good pick. On the offensive side in particular, definitely one that stands out. But I think there are some better options on the defensive side of the football. And one guy, I've written about him a couple times already, but defensive end Devin Taylor has really seemed to start to come into his own this offseason. Taylor has been dominating the second line offensive tackles, and I know that that's an accomplishment that needs to be tempered, but you can only beat who you face, and he's beating them routinely. He seems to have a full array of pass rush moves. His confidence seems sky high. He got some off-season work in with veterans, particularly Darryl Tapp, and the Lions really need a defensive end to step forward in a pass rush capacity to kind of complement what Ezekiel Ansah brings, and they don't have that guy on the roster, at least coming into camp, and Taylor's looking like he can be that guy.
He's looked really good, certainly better than Webster at this point. I think they're kind of trying to fill the same kind of role. At the same time, I do want to mention he's going up against Corey Robinson in a lot of those one-on-one drills, and Corey Robinson has been one of the worst players on the field over the past 3 or 4 days. Ever since you mentioned him positively.
He started off all right, but it's been downhill from there. So sorry, Corey.
For me, most improved, same position group, different player, Karan Reed. And Absolutely. It's not a surprise to MLive readers. We've talked about it all off season, but it's the same stuff. It's the same stuff over and over. His body looks different. His technique looks different. His confidence looks different. He's asserting himself on the line. He's taken first team reps throughout the off season, and even when Nada was repping with the unit. You have to, I think, really like what you see from him. And in those one-on-ones, he's going up against Manny Ramirez, who's in that conversation to start at left guard, and has taken it to him. At least has held his own, if not won most of those battles. And I think he's a player that he could lose that job battle with Tyron Walker, but even if he does, I think you're going to see him a lot this year. I think he's proven himself as a guy who is going to contribute in 2015.
Yeah, and back to the offensive side of the ball. Like as we said, Williams looks a lot better. He looks so much more comfortable at offensive tackle. Has done some first team work with right tackle as Cornelius Lucas makes sure to get in his left tackle work. But another guy I'd like to mention is George Winn, running back. I know we were kind of looking at Zach Center as maybe a sleeper for the roster, but I think Winn's kind of quieted some of those talks early in camp. He's been running with the first team, kind of filling Joique Bell's role, running very strong. Joe Lombardi used the words, "I love George" today. Just the sound of his pads when he hits somebody in that secondary, it's the most distinct sound in camp. You know exactly with your eyes closed when George Winn has run the ball. He's hitting holes with authority. He seems more comfortable and confident on special teams, and I think he's really kind of locked himself into that fourth job at this stage in camp.
Yeah, physical runner contributes a lot in special teams. I think he's well ahead of Zenner at this point as the final running back in that competition. As long as we're sticking with honorable mentions on offense, for me, Andrew Peacock. And again, as I've said previously, I'm not sure if he wins a job. He's got a lot of competition going for that last receiver job, but he's just, to me, a guy who I've seen develop week after week since he first came to the club last year. He was really raw last year in training camp, I thought. Then developed throughout camp. Lions kept her on the practice squad. And you saw the confidence building week by week. And by the end of the season, I thought he was actually looking like one of the better practice team players. Fast forward to this camp, and you see he's building on those performances. He reps a lot with Kellen Moore and Dan Orlovsky. And nothing against those guys, but they aren't Matthew Stafford. The accuracy's not there. And it gives Andrew Peacock, in a way, a chance to show his stuff because he's making a lot of difficult catches on the reserve units. You see balls coming in high and low and to the side and whatever, and he's catching everything that's thrown his way. I see him repping a lot against Quandre Diggs, the promising nickelback, and winning a lot of those competitions as well. I see him make a lot of good plays, and Yeah, I've talked to him earlier in camp, and he had said that he's working a lot on his yak, and that's something you can't really see as much when you're not hitting and tackling and stuff, but that's something I think to look at going forward, because if he can turn those 10 or 15-yard patterns into big plays, then he's going to have a much better shot at sticking with the team.
Let me flip this on you and put you on the spot, as you so often do to me. Not a guy that's necessarily improved, but maybe a guy that came onto this roster, rookie or not, that probably wasn't going to make the roster. We assume would never have a shot at the roster, but has done enough in camp where you're a little bit more intrigued now.
I think I'm not sure if this is the best example. You're putting me on the spot, but this is the first name that's come to my mind.
Yeah, grab the deepest guy on the roster.
Josh Wilson. He's a guy who signed. I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
To be perfectly frank, I didn't know who he was. He's been in the league for 8 years, so it shows you how much I paid attention. But just struck me as just a guy. But I've liked what I've seen from him in the nickel. I think the Lions have too, because they're repping him quite a bit with the first unit and nickel back. I think every time I ask about what's going on in nickel with the coaches, they always say, well, we like the promise of Diggs and Lawson, some of these young guys, but we really value experience at that spot. And we saw what happened last year at the nickel with all the injuries and all the moving parts at nickel. Bentley, Lawson, Cassius Vaughn, Don Carey. They cycled through all those guys in like 2 or 3 weeks of the season.
No love for Danny Gore.
Well, they signed Danny Gore in week 3 of the season, signed him off the street, threw him out there 4 days later or 5 days later in the starting lineup against Aaron Rodgers. That's how bad the depth had become at that spot. Just not a lot of experience. And that's a spot. I was talking to Glover Quinn this week, and I wrote about it a little bit on MLive, but he says that position, that nickel position, sometimes is more difficult than outside cornerback, even though outside cornerback is where the big-name guys are, because at least on the outside, you have more time to watch the ball. You have more time to anticipate what a quarterback is going to do. Everything happens a little faster in the seam, in the nickel. And so maybe top-end speed's not as important in the nickel, but you need to know exactly what you're doing and be able to anticipate a receiver, because everything happens so fast. You need to stick closer to the receiver. And I think that's why the Lions value a guy like Wilson, who's done this for 8 years. He's been primarily nickel since college. Like what I've seen from him, and I wasn't necessarily anticipating that. How about you?
I'm going super deep here, and neither one of these guys, may make the roster, but I don't actually know if the second one's practice squad eligible. But on the offensive line, Taylor Boggs, interior lineman, I think the interior jobs are kind of locked up with Manny Ramirez and Laken Tomlinson, Travis Swanson, and Larry Warford. That's kind of set, but Boggs has really held his own in camp and strikes me as a good fit for the practice squad. He does have some NFL experience with the Chicago Bears the last 2 years. And on defense, R.J. Stanford is a cornerback they just kind of signed out of nowhere. Didn't think twice about him, and I can't tell you how many times I've jotted his number down on a paper for making a breakup. He had an interception in the scrimmage on Kellen Moore. He's a big cornerback. He's thick through the upper body. Seems like he can play physical in the line of scrimmage. And as the longer Alex Carter's out with this ankle injury, I don't know the extent of it, but he's still moving gingerly. Somebody may have an opportunity to emerge as a depth backup cornerback, and Stanford has looked consistently the best to me.
I think Chris Owens is maybe ahead of Stanford at this point, but I think Stanford's in that discussion. Creston Butler's had some moments too. Also, he's had some moments against Kelvin Johnson that are unmemorable probably, but that's going to happen against Kelvin. I think Creston's having some moments as well in that battle.
Corey Fuller chewed him up today. At the risk of ruining a good video, we've done this on one take. What is not improved is Mr. Meinke's fashion sense.
Come on.
The young man. I'm not going to make him stand and spin, but he's wearing capri pants today, folks. I don't know what to say about that.
Neither do I.
All right, I've ruined it.
Nothing to say.
Yeah.
I got them in REI. What do you want from me?
Yeah.
Someone has to bring a little style to this speed. And it's not going to be you. It's not going to be you.
Listen, some of the capri pants, folks. It's not style.
I won't tell you which section of the store I got them from. For Justin Rogers, I'm Kyle Meinke. We are MLive. Keep it right here.